Hi, my name is Chase Umberger, and I'm here to talk about how movies and movie genres have shaped today's society and gender roles. Growing up, many children looked to their mothers and fathers for how to act. They looked up to their neighbors, their aunts, and their uncles, even characters they see in books, comics, and movies. They grow up learning from different people. Little girls are given pink dolls, whereas boys are given blue guns, action figures, and other masculine items. From a young age, society enforces gender stereotypes on children and how they should act when they are young. At the beginning of the film age, there was a huge stereotype on men. Let's start today with the first general stereotype in the 1950s, the Western films. In the 1950s, there was masculinity and a huge gender stereotype. For example, the movie Shane was one of the most famous Western films at that age. Shane was released in the mid 1950s. During this time, gender roles were that men were the breadwinners, and they were rough and tough and straight. That the women didn't really have a lot to say, and there was no talk of transgender, gay, or queer people. If there was, LGBT plus people, community members were the social outcasts and looked down on and not talked about. Growing up, children looked up to the people that they saw on film. These people were the cowboys and all the characters in the Western genre. As a kid watching this movie, many children walked away wanting to be a cowboy. In the movie Shane, the character Joey, who was the young child, wanted to be like Shane, the main cowboy, because he was very confident and fit the everyday idea of a quote man that most of the society demanded. A lot of the typical Western genre that was portrayed in Shane. For example, the main character used violence to suit the Western role. In the end, Shane was the hero and he was the manliest of all the cowboys because he used violence to win over everyone. There were many views in that movie and the ones that came from society. It was thought that people of everyday lives, men were more masculine. The more masculinity they had, the more a man they were. The Western film was a huge part of the everyday life of men, especially of the West. In the movie Shane, the character Joey wanted to be Shane because he was confident. To children, their dream is to have the same manliness as a cowboy, whereas the main cowboy, Shane, wanted to have the same masculinity as Joey's father, Joe. The idea is focused on being a cowboy, but also what Joe had that Shane didn't was that he was never self conscious of his homestead and the occupation he had for his family. The idea of being a cowboy was being lonely and afraid of love. And even though they are free to do what they want, they like it to be much better to be living on a farm with a lady. Shane would never have what Joe had, and this was a family man instead of being violent, the violent version of masculinity. Cowboys were starting to be a dying breed as the Western films changed, and so did society. Recently, a new movie, Brokeback Mountain, changed the idea of masculinity. It confused audience with this new outlook on men and how they can show their more masculine side. In the show Justified, there's a character named Rylan Givens with a sensitive side. In most of the episodes, Givens was seen to be upset over a girl or falling head over heels for her, which is not what most men express openly to women. Which, according to one article by a man named Rorschach, the Western hero, by contrast, is a figure of repose. He resembles the gangster in being lonely to some, but not compelled to seek love. He is prepared to accept it, perhaps, but he never asks of it more than it is given, and we see him constantly in situations where love, at the best, is irrelevant. Most of the television shows that show the cowboys to be distant and harsh towards women, whereas Givens in the show is soft for women. The movie challenged people to look at a cowboy in the Western film in a deeper way. the way that constructed a new social norms of society. It was breaking old traditions and modernizing them. There was no longer a question on why there was a character being sensitive or afraid because that was what any normal human would react. Hollywood was putting a more reality on the stereotypical thought of a man and changing the way that they are. The old cowboy was a traditional man, and now they are changing it. Recently, there was a movie that came out called Jane Got a Gun. The main character in the movie was a female playing a cowboy. Although there have been movies in the past showing women as cowboy characters, never in Hollywood's history has there been a lead role for it. It made people look at women in a different way. Going off the idea of men being objectified and changing, but there's also a stereotype of women, especially in the horror films. According to the article Her Body, Himself, Gender in the Slasher Film by Carol J. Clover, horror and pornography have the same appeal in the brain as each other. The quote art of the horror film is like an art of pornography. It is very large extent to the rendition and also such a compent audience. When the high popular slasher films came out, there was a big hype for them. There were people who would see movie after movie. The reason is the new horror and the thrill that they were giving them a rush, they wanted to see more. It was the same idea with the pornography industry. People wanted to see more and more creative films. After a while, the hype was over and people became bored again. The violence in the slasher films became more obvious, and especially the violence towards women. The two genres of pornography and horror are similar and different. Instead of the sexualized films, people were watching horror, and instead of horror, people were watching sexualized films, so they combined them. There were a lot of gender stereotyping. The male was mostly the killer, targeting women. In both films, there was a strong, independent woman being stalked while her friends were being murdered. Although there was the same theme, in one movie, Halloween, a woman was killed. The women that were killed were sex-crazed party animals, whereas in other films, they were independent and intelligent, but they were still stalked and killed for their sexuality. The women that usually survived in the end of these films were the ones that were stronger, smarter, and less involved with men, meaning that women who were more involved with men and more sexualized are the target and should be killed. Women were taught from these films that having sex is bad and they should be killed for it, where it's okay that there is a man doing these things and a man not being killed for them. Sexualized films and horror films were to be sexually aroused and sexually appealing from the women on screen. The film directors use women to draw in our thrill of the viewers watching. The idea behind the films is to see the rush and power that the male viewers get when they are seeing a woman being sexualized and killed in these films. The slasher film industry and the pornography industry uses their own masculinity and power to degrade and dehumanize women that they use on screen. In both industries, they use women as whores and bitches, and between the women who like having sex and the women that talk back to men are usually the ones to die in horror films. The murder of most women in slasher films happen when they are not a virgin. The final girl is the one who is a virgin and is never sexualized for her body. She is always the one to come out on top. This was used for entertainment and saying that women who have sex all the time were not okay. In another film, The Avengers, Black Widow is one of the characters in the film and the only female Avenger in the film. She's belittling to her sexuality, especially during the first movie. There is a scene where Black Widow was using her feminine power to persuade Loki, one of the evildoers. This example is also seen in the movie Aladdin, where Jasmine uses her femininity and sexuality to persuade Jafar to pay attention to her and have Aladdin get away, according to the Mickey Mouse Monopoly. During the scene, Loki calls Black Widow a mimbling queen, which is one of the cruelest insults in the modern language. He starts making threats about how he will rape, torture, and kill her. He uses this misogynistic insults to frighten her because she is a female and he thinks that she is weak, sensitive, and too emotional to be able to handle it. That directly relates back to horror films, which is usually used in most of the movies. You see a lot of gender stereotyping against women in movies like Disney. These movies are bad to use gender stereotypes because they are shaping the minds of many children in the future beliefs that they are supposed to act. Disney is a wholesome entertainment for children and is a huge part of the American culture, but it highly sexualizes women. It only shows small waists, boobs, batting eyelashes, which can really affect girls and their outlooks on themselves. To them, they also have to have small waists, big boobs, and batting eyelashes every time they are around someone. Looking at Disney, there is a very similar focus movie to movie. They are all the same. They repeat the nature of the films, which is extremely worrying because that is what is normalizing in society. In the movie Aladdin, like I said, Jasmine uses her body to get what she wants. In the Disney films, females are always needed to be saved. When in doubt, they are always get themselves into danger and they are the reasons that they need to be saved. Never the evil guy's fault. As society changes, so does Disney, but only to put women in the same but different gender roles. From Snow White, who was always wanting to clean, that taught women that they should be cleaning and cooking in the house, to Little Mermaid, where she defies her father, but only to lose her voice for a man so that he can get to know her for her body, and that way he takes care of her, and instead of learning who she is and her personality and her voice. Mulan is really the only independent character in Disney. But even at the end of the movie, she is not thanked for saving all of China, but expected to be married right away. And even in the film Beauty and the Beast, Belle is looked at as a smart, independent woman because she can read a book. Even following that, she is met with an abusive relationship that is teaching little girls that it is okay to be in that sort of situation as long as you stay nice and not make them mad. This is forcing children to get the wrong ideas in their head and to think that this is okay to think of themselves in this way. According to Garabak in Gender Sexuality for Beginners, children would attempt to identify their correct path and seek approval by following the suggestions around them. This would include watching media and seeing different ideas of what media draws out for them. The media is teaching children that boys will be boys and girls should be girls in a dehumanizing sort of way, and it needs to be changed. Thank you.